Well, it is time for us to take a look at some of our Thursday morning headlines. Some of the sources, of course, that I like to use: the BBC, the Russian TASS news agency, the Russian Izvestia newspaper, the Guardian, basically non-United States corporate-influenced news sources. And I say that carefully because I do understand that there's a big controversy about what's real news, what's fake news. Let me tell you that all these stories are stories that you will see in different publications around the world. My point of choosing the non-U.S. sources as much as I can is to give you a different perspective. Hopefully it's something, maybe even it's something you haven't even heard. For instance, did you know that in the South China Sea, China has been building up weaponry on several of these artificial islands out there, these Spratsky Islands that are basically in international waters that a whole bunch of other countries, Asian countries and others, have claimed this is our international, these are not our waters. It's international waters, right? Well, the Chinese have been militarizing after they said they would not. And we've got satellite imagery going on. We've got a whole bunch of different anti-aircraft weapons going into the island, some of them being buried to make it so that they are less vulnerable to an aerial attack. The whole point of it is this, is that everybody's eyes right now are on China as China continues to build up in this area that they promised they wouldn't. Putin, back in the headlines, Vladimir Putin, of course, president of Russia, he's been named the top most influential person in the world for the 4th time now. Meanwhile, his popularity is also apparently skyrocketing among Republicans. Yeah, he's got, I think, a 47% approval rating now, which is kind of interesting if you think about it, giving the background of, you know, the Republican opposition to the Soviets, and now here's Putin, and everybody's like, oh, he's a nice guy, right? Well, we'll see. The El Faro is a very serious story. If you remember that cargo ship that went down during a hurricane, now the NTSB has released the longest transcript ever in the history of their investigations, going through 25 hours as the ship was entering into the storm, and then, of course, the last horrifying moments, all of it there in the transcript. They got the black box off the bottom of the ocean. Remember that ceasefire in Aleppo? Yeah, it didn't last more than a couple of hours. Apparently, at least 40 people have been shelled, according to a rescue group. They had the buses rolled in and everything good to go. And now the United Nations says that the raids in Aleppo are likely a war crime. In fact, the UN Commissioner for Human Rights said specifically that dangling out this hope of being able to get out of this besieged city and then taking it away is cruel. It's also war. And this is one of the things that a lot of people don't think about, is the civilian populations of these cities that both sides are claiming and fighting over. Anyway, the Aleppo, once again, ceasefire is broken and is likely going to continue fighting for at least a few more days before they even talk about another ceasefire. Japan's economic minister says that Russia is at the forefront of possibilities for Tokyo as they're looking at strengthening their economic ties. In the EU, one of the European Union members, Juncker, has come out to say specifically that they oppose any new sanctions against Russia over the Syria issue. Back in the United States, in Ohio, Governor Kasich has vetoed the heartbeat bill, but he did sign a 20-week abortion ban. Could be a conflicting statement, different signals going out. The United States is raising key interest rates, the federal bank here, by 0.25%, because they say the economy is strengthening. The co-founder of Core Power Yoga was found dead under suspicious circumstances inside his $3 million California mansion. They haven't elaborated as to what those suspicious circumstances are, but anytime you have a 48-year-old healthy man, rich, showing up dead, questions have to be asked. China's state-run newspaper has denounced U.S. arrogance and is calling for more weapons buildup, in this particular case, nuclear weapons buildup, especially in light of the tough words that Donald Trump has had for China. The question, why are Indians being arrested for sitting during the national anthem? We're talking about in India. A law was passed and upheld by their Supreme Court, which demands that the national anthem be played at the start of every movie. In fact, into the start of every public event. And some people were actually arrested and are facing charges for disrespecting the law, disrespecting the national anthem. The question why is a good question to ask. But another question that you might want to ask yourself is, what if that kind of thing happens here? Legendary international jewel thief Doris Payne 86 years old. 60 years as a notorious con artist at it again. Got caught shoplifting a $2,000 necklace. There's one of the massive waves in the Atlantic. They've now verified, it was actually said a couple of years ago, the biggest wave recorded by a buoy ever. The biggest one before that was 95 feet. This one was like 65 feet, but the one that they recorded before wasn't by a buoy. It was by a ship that saw the wave. So I don't know if that makes it more accurate, whatever. Just in the wake of a storm. I mean, can you imagine having a 65-foot wave or a 95-foot? Either way, wow. And lastly, Secretary of State Kerry has assured the Russians that the United States is working with the opposition groups that have been, according to the Russians, sabotaging the Syrian talks. Keeping an eye on those stories. On today's commentary, I'm going to talk a little bit about fatherhood and specifically what I do with my kids when it comes to cooking. And we also got our Alaska news here as well. If you'd like what I'm doing, please consider buying a subscription or becoming a sponsor on Patreon so that I can continue to do this. And, of course, the more sponsors we have, the more I can do. We are looking at opening up a phone line here very shortly. We'll actually have some two-way conversation on some of these issues in the commentary. Something you want me to talk about, email me, steve@radiofreespeech.com. And once again, tell all your friends, the website is radiofreespeech.com.